Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. Well, good day to you. It is October the 9th, and I hope you're having a great day wherever and whenever you are hearing this information. I do want to take a brief moment and thank you for checking out this channel, listening to it, however length of time you happen to listen to these videos. Whether it's your first time hearing this information or if you've actually come back several times to listen to these videos, I really want to thank you. Not that I get anything out of it personally for myself other than the opportunity to help in some way, which is very beneficial for me personally. As you can see on Search for Signs, there are no advertisements, there is no donation button, and there never will be. I do this as a form of service to help people as best as little or as much as I can, right? Now, the reason why I'm thanking you, like I said, is not for me, but it's really for you, is this information, if it's true, and I'm going to put it like that because I want you to always feel like I'm just throwing this information out for you to consider and I don't want you to feel like I'm cornering you at your favorite grocery store in the produce aisle and I'm just trying to ram all this down your throat, like people have a tendency to do, right? And whether it's political, ideologies or they're, very passionate about a topic or whatever. I just want to kind of throw this out for your consideration. You should feel free to believe it or not on your own and go on with your life however you want to do it. But it's important information from the way I see it. It's probably hands down some of the most important, if not the most important information that we can do. Now, what we talk about here on this channel, if this is your first time checking this out, is Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, why they're here, what it means for humanity. It is a hopeful message because, according to Maitreya himself, humanity is on the very, very brink of changing its course and direction to eventually creating true and lasting peace through the principle of sharing. Now, it might seem rather utopian to you, might seem rather far-fetched, but if this information is true, it will start to be established in the not-so-distant future out of necessity, because the way Maitreya puts it, without sharing there could be no justice, without justice there could be no peace, without peace there could be no future. That's how important it is. So again, I'm throwing this out for your, hopefully you have a little bit of an open mind about it. Now, you can always add to the discussion by asking a question or posting a comment if it's related to this. And if I think that it can add to the discussion, I will do my best to answer, to address that comment, but I always try to answer the questions as best I can in the next video. So hopefully that helps. And like I said, hopefully you can get through and suffer through all my dad jokes in the process. Now, there were a few questions and some comments that came in late, but I want to swing back and address this one that somebody wrote a few days ago. This person was commenting about not the last video, but the video before that. And it made me start to think, because he was asking, or she was asking about, is this real? What does all this mean about the Masters of Wisdom and so forth? And I started thinking about it. Maybe I am answering, in the process of answering people's questions about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, I'm not giving enough of a background for those people who are just now coming upon this information. So I think in more of a timely manner, I'll do more introductory videos to kind of, help solidify some of this information for those who know it, but also for those who have never heard this information, kind of get you caught up as best you possibly can. So this is going to be one of those, and then I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that, and a couple of the comments in the process of answering this one question. So it says, so I have two questions for you. What do you think will happen with Trump now that he is COVID-19 positive? And you talk about the Masters, and I'm trying to keep up with what you're saying about them. But what does this all mean about the Masters? I guess I'm asking, are they real? Now, if you're interested in my opinion about what I think Trump and the election is about, I answered it in the last one. So I'm sorry I duplicated that. But I tried to answer the second part of this question, and it just got so lengthy that I wanted to kind of just focus on this in this video. So hopefully this helps. if I were to answer the question, especially are they real, I would have to really talk about my own personal experiences in relation to Maitreya and these masters. So I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got into this information, a little bit about my experiences, just a few, a brief history about the masters, and kind of bring it up to date to what's going on today and possibly into the future. So hopefully this helps, because somebody else brought up a question about the Day of Declaration and so forth, and I'll hopefully be answering it in this question, too. So it's kind of like a twofer. All right, here we go. So I first heard about the Masters of Wisdom through my guitar teacher back when I was in high school. I would go every week to study the bass with him, and I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 1988, so I was maybe a sophomore in high school. And one night when I was over there for the bass lesson, I noticed one of Alice Bailey's books on his table. And Alice Bailey's books are very simple. They're just a blue book with this white lettering. And that's what caught my eye, was the cover of this book. They always say, don't ever judge a book by its cover, but sometimes a book cover can change your life. In this instance, it actually, in a very real sense, did. So I was intrigued by the color of the book and what it said. It said, Initiation, Human and Solar was the title of the book. I asked him some questions. I don't know exactly the questions that I asked him and how he answered it, but I just remember starting to ask him questions. And he was always really good at explaining things and helping me understand things, whether it was music or other things. But in the process of me asking these questions, I started to really be very interested in this topic, to the point where it not only changed the course of the direction of my musical lessons, because for quite some time after that, we didn't even pick up the bass anymore. We just talked about the Masters of Wisdom and what it meant and so forth. But it quite literally changed the course of direction of my life. Now, the other thing was, as we were discussing this, two things. One, I didn't realize that what Alice Bailey was talking about in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, that was she was saying it was going to happen, was already happening at the time that I was reading this in the 80s. And so I didn't realize that this stuff was going on. And then the other thing was I didn't realize I had any contact with any, or these masters had contacted me in any way, shape, or form through visitations and through some miracles and so forth. So I had no clue that this was going on. I just realized I was just interested in this topic. And then I moved to Atlanta. Not long after that, I stumbled across one of Benjamin Creme's books. And Benjamin Creme is really, a lot of the information that I talk about comes from him. When I read the articles coming from his own master, usually at the end of each one of these videos, comes from his books and so forth. And he claimed to have telepathic contact with one of these masters. And his information about the masters was that, and he had been talking about it for decades from the point that I had actually read this book. So it was like maybe 20 years or so that he had been talking about this, that the masters that Alice Bailey was talking about were already coming back into the world right behind the head and leader of that group, Maitreya. And Maitreya had been living in London since July 19th, 1977. He also claimed that there were several masters who started to enter major cities. Now, these masters, and I'm going to talk about who and what a master is in a second, but these masters were once, eons ago, teaching humanity very directly, like they're about to do in our lifetime. But for eons, they were unknown to humanity, forgotten, totally, nowhere in the memory of most humanity was it even, remembered that these masters existed. In some of the folklore and some of the myths of maybe Greece, of Greek mythology and so forth, were hidden some of the truths about these masters. But for the most part, and by and large, most people walk on the planet don't have no idea who these masters are, what a master is, and what they really mean for them. Okay, now, eons ago, like I said, they were teaching humanity directly, and they, as a result of a great conflict during the time of Atlantis, which we can talk about Atlantis a little later in this discussion, they saw it as what they needed to do was to retreat and go totally out of the public eye. And this was 100,000 years ago that this happened, much longer than most historians even think that humanity's been alive on this planet, but not long in reference to how long humanity has really been on this planet, but which is 18.5 million years. But according to the ageless wisdom teachings, these masters lived remotely, in total isolation, out of the public eye. Now, these masters are not like ordinary people. They look like us, but they're not ordinary people. In fact, they were still living full, rich, wonderful lives, totally in total isolation. So they weren't going stir crazy or anything like that. All the while, the work that they were doing with humanity to help humanity eons ago was still going on, but at a much slower pace, because they had to work indirectly through their disciples in the world. So according to the ageless wisdom teachings, any man or woman who helped contribute to society in whatever field of endeavor they were working in, whether it was arts, sculpture, music, literature, politics, education, healthcare, science, those kind of things, even just, discoverers and, conquerors even sometimes, were working with one or other of these masters, most of the time not knowing anything about who these masters were, but in rare instances knew very much who these masters were. Okay, so the way that they would work is, and I like to use this as an example, let's say women's right to vote here in the United States. More than likely, in fact, I know it was under the inspiration of one of these masters that brought it to Susan B. Anthony and her group of people, the idea that it's not only possible, but it's the best thing for them to do is to work toward helping women have the right to vote in the United States. They saw it as just an idea that they had. They're got fed up with the state of affairs of the world, but what really inspired them to do it was one of these masters planted a thought in their mind that this is something that they should do, and they started to doing it, and then it changed the course of human history for this country, because now women have the right to vote. Created more equality in workplace and so forth by their ability to vote and so forth. So it's totally transformed women's lives here in the United States. But they more than likely didn't know anything about the masters at that time. Now, there were other disciples like Shakespeare, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, for instance, and they're artists, in the arts field, that worked very directly with these masters, knew who these masters were, telepathically their masters were hidden away in isolation, but they were working telepathically through their disciple, like Mozart or Beethoven or Bach or Shakespeare and whatever, in those fields, to help teach humanity through music and through literature about the laws of life, about the ageless wisdom teachings and so forth. So within the music of Mozart and Bach and the literature of William Shakespeare, for examples, is a lot of the truths that these masters are teaching us, or trying to teach us about. Other great disciples, which are much rarer than even somebody like Beethoven or Bach or Shakespeare, as much of an influence that they had on their, art and literature and so forth, were other great disciples like Leonardo da Vinci, Muhammad, the Buddha, and of course, Jesus of Nazareth. And so when Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, when he came into incarnation in Palestine, around the age of 13, started to be trained by one of these masters for his role as the world teacher for the age of Pisces. According to the ageless wisdom teachings, Jesus knew his role, knew of the masters, allowed the master of all the masters, who's coming back into the world now, Maitreya, to teach humanity through him telepathically. That was his role. And same thing with the Gautama Buddha, allowing the Buddha to teach to that group of people in India in very much the same way. But because I know more historically about Jesus and the esoteric view of Jesus, let me continue to talk more about Jesus and, let's say, the Buddha or even Leonardo da Vinci. But so from the age of 30 to the time that he died on the cross, he was almost totally Maitreya was working through him almost moment to moment to the small group of people around Jesus. Now, the Christians, when you go to church, they would say that there were thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who were following Jesus. Esoterically, there was no truth to that. It was just a few hundred people who were aware of even who Jesus was, maybe didn't know exactly, maybe believe, maybe were kind of unsure, but they were listening to him. Then you had a closer group of people and an even closer group of the 12 disciples and so forth. But it was a much tinier group than most Christians today give it credit. But according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings too, Jesus, being a very, very advanced disciple, never once claimed to be the only true Son of God. And was his teachings, the teachings that Maitreya gave through him, like the law about the law of cause and effect, what you sow, so shall you reap, about the law of rebirth, some of the stories about where he was talking to his disciples about John the Baptist, and he would say, who do the people say that I am? And they'd say, well, you're John the Baptist, come back again. And he even said, well, don't you remember, or when they asked about who John the Baptist was another example, and he said, don't you remember who I said, or who I said he was? He's Elijah, come back again. So he was talking to the people, especially his closer disciples, about the law of reincarnation. Not so much in the Bible as much as anymore, because after, and this kind of ties into the point of why people have a hard time understanding this information at this time, is because over the last 2,000 years, humanity is kind of, the people who wrote the Bible put in what they wanted, took out what they didn't. Oh, I don't really like anything about reincarnation, because that means that people don't have to listen to me. They can just, okay, if I don't get it now, I'll get it tomorrow, get it in my next lifetime kind of deal. So they took that information out, put stuff in there. People like Paul, who never heard Jesus speak, wrote things, spoke for Jesus in that way and so forth. And it created a lot of distortion and it brought it to the world today, where really, I think, in a very real sense, most fundamentalist Christians really have no idea who and what the Christ is about, let alone what he really was. And they think they know the truth of it, and they're willing to die for their own beliefs for it. They're willing to kill even for their own beliefs in certain extreme instances. But for the most part, people live their lives believing what they believe is true and what other people believe is false, and they're going to go to heaven and everyone's going to go to hell. That's pretty much the state of affairs of the religious side of it, right? Now, where this all fits into this is those masters that were lived in retreat for eons knew that at some point they would have to come back. At some point. They didn't know when. They were thinking even just 100 or so years ago that it would be another 1,000 years before they would be able to come back. That humanity would be ready for them to be accepted and have their teachings, actually be beneficial to humanity, really. And around 1920-ish, 1930, that kind of thing, there was another great teacher, a lot like Jesus was, but that was being trained in the same way that Jesus was trained 2,000 years ago, as the vessel for the world teacher for this age, because it was not expected that these masters would be coming back at this time. And that disciple's name is Krishnamurti, and you can actually see some of his YouTube videos, and they're quite enlightening. Unfortunately, we don't have any YouTube videos of Jesus speaking 2,000 years ago, which would be probably very similar to what Krishnamurti was talking about. Krishnamurti never claimed to be the only true Son of God, just like I don't think Jesus did either. It was just put in there by man, for man, to serve man's purposes, really. Now, a stunning turn of events happened at the time that Krishnamurti was being trained to be the world teacher for this age. Is humanity started to develop rather rapidly. We experienced the great wars of World War I and World War II, but the real problem was humanity developed a weapon of unspeakable power that could really destroy all life on the planet if given the right circumstances. So the masters, who are not only our guides and our teachers and stimulate humanity, to move forward, they're also our protectors. They protect us from ourselves a lot of times. So they saw that we could destroy ourselves if we were left alone for another 1,000 years. So that's why Maitreya hastened his return to come back during this crucial time and this historic time. He made an announcement through one of the disciples, Alice A. Bailey, like I was just talking about the book that actually led me along this path, in June of 1945, not long after World War II was really coming to an end. He said that he would have to come back himself along with his group of masters. But humanity would have to do three things. They would have to create a measure of peace. It didn't have to be perfect, but they'd have to create a measure of peace. The principle of sharing would have to start governing the minds of our world leaders, and probably The hardest to see even among those two, as actually a measure of that happening, was the political parties around the world and in most countries would have to start cleaning house and cleaning up some of their corruption. So those three things had to happen. And he was hoping that it would be about 5 years that would take place. But because the Cold War started and the arms race started between Russia and the United States didn't suffer like Europe did. We kind of went right back into the way we did things. So his eventual return was pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Now, Benjamin Creme was asked personally by Maitreya to make known the fact that Maitreya was coming back into the world far sooner than anybody would have ever expected him to be able to come back. The Christ awaited by all the world's religions, known as the Imam Mahdi for the Muslims, the Christ for the Christians, the Sri Krishna or the Kalki avatar for the Hindus, the Messiah for the Jews, and of course the fifth Buddha for the Buddha, and the world teacher for those who don't have a faith. The awaited teacher was coming back. And he started making public announcements of this in 1975. He said that it wouldn't be long until Maitreya would leave his abode and enter a major city. And what happened was on July 19th, 1977, Maitreya entered London without any fanfare, without any notice. Nobody was sent any memos about it. But really, it will be looked back. If this information is true, July 19th, 1977 will be looked at one of the most momentous days in human history that was totally missed by everybody except for Benjamin Creme, really. And then now, once we learn that, that was the day, everyone's going to be trying to remember what they did in July 19th, 1977. And believe me, I've known about this information for the last 25 years, and I can't remember what I was doing on July 19th, 1977. I remember what happened in August of 1977. I remember Elvis, dying, but that was about it. That's pretty much all I remember that summer, But the one awaited by all the world's religions entered the world. It was a most astounding event, that, like I said, went unnoticed by everybody. And since then, he had been waiting, and this kind of answers the question of when somebody asked the question, hey, Gary, when do you think Maitreya is coming, soon or not soon? Okay, so this will kind of help answer that question. Ever since then, he had been living in the Asian community of London, recognized as the Imam Mahdi because it's a Muslim community by and large. A lot of people were starting to suspect he might be the Imam Mahdi. Some people didn't know. Some people just saw him as a teacher. Some people really thought he was the Imam Mahdi. So it just kind of depended on who you talked to. Now, Benjamin Creme made an announcement in 1982 that if just one reporter of any kind of reputation, and he made this announcement to a press pool, to a press conference with 30 or 40 journalists there, that if any one of them would have done it, it would have sparked Maitreya to come forward far sooner than he ever did. But if just one or a tiny group of them went into the Asian community of London, started asking questions, started to do some investigative journalism, trying to find Maitreya, that Maitreya would be able to seek them out. And it would signal to humanity it would signal to Maitreya that humanity was ready to finally start making the needed changes to help save ourselves. But we didn't do it. It wasn't on Maitreya's end. It was on our end. So we didn't do it. Maitreya waited patiently, and then it started to look like it was not going to come anytime soon, I guess. But Maitreya and these masters started to flood the world with miracles. And you can look these up online. There's evidence of them all over, in all walks of life, in all religions. They started having these miracles, weeping icons, crosses of light, the Hindu milk miracle, strange fruit that was cut up in the Middle East, for Muslims that spelled out Allah and whatever, and angel sightings all over the place. People were claiming to be healed by an angel or saved in an accident by an angel or actually been touched by an angel in some kind of way. Then all of a sudden, all around the skies, UFOs started showing up, and crop circles started showing up. And all the while, Benjamin Creme was saying that all these miracle signs are linked, and they're all pointing to the fact that Maitreya is in London waiting for an invitation to come forward and start to teach humanity directly like these masters did eons ago. It would begin the process of it. And it took a long time before I think Maitreya finally said, you know what? They're not obviously coming into the Asian community of London to seek me out, so I'm going to have to do it myself and come out and do an interview. So kind of like my grandfather used to always say, if you aren't going to come to Allah, sometimes Allah's got to come to you. Or Muhammad's got to, you always say, yeah, if you don't come to Muhammad, sometimes Muhammad's got to come to you. So it's the same kind of principle. Maitreya said, if you're not going to come to me, eventually I'm going to have to come to you, because that's what happened. So Benjamin Creme made another announcement back in January of 2010 that Maitreya had already made a television interview in front of millions of people and given that interview in front of millions of people. Now, he never claimed to be Maitreya, so if you look trying to find it like so many people have, you're probably going to miss it. But he looks how he looks. He looks obviously very different than the picture of Maitreya that's up here in the very top corner. That's how he looked in Nairobi, Kenya, which was one of the other miracles that happened around the time of all these other, the Hindu milk miracle and so forth. But, and then since then, according to Benjamin Creme, Maitreya had been giving interviews in not only the United States, but in Europe, Japan, Central and South America, and Russia, China, and those kind of things. And unfortunately, since Benjamin Creme's passing, nobody really knows what Maitreya has been doing in terms of where he's been giving interviews, but has been giving interviews speaking directly to humanity, but still at the same time being quite unknown. Just like how his coming came in July 19th, 1977, with no fanfare, being missed by pretty much everybody in humanity. Him speaking to humanity is being missed by really pretty much everybody. So to answer the question, is he coming? Yes, he's already come. He's already on TV. Now, the other question should be is, when do you think that we are going to start to recognize him more and more? Because we've heard about this information maybe for decades, still haven't seen him on TV ourselves, therefore it may or may not be real. And that's for you to decide. If you don't think it's real, then go on, do your thing, But if there's any truth to this, then really it's only a matter of time before he starts to ramp up his message, and it's a little easier for those who know about this information or just hearing it for the first time to pick up on that is Maitreya. Now, to answer the question about the Day of Declaration and what that is Maitreya will never claim to be Maitreya on TV until the Day of Declaration. Even if he's asked directly by a reporter or somebody in the crowd, he will neither confirm it nor deny it. He'll find a way to skirt around the question. So just like most politicians do when it comes to a debate, so just think about a politician, but he's not doing it to be clever or to hide anything. He's just doing it because it's not right. That's not the right timing for us to know who he is. But more and more people will start to suspect that there's something extraordinary about this guy. They might not know he's Maitreya or the Christ come back, but they're going to want to hear more what he has to say. And more people will start to kind of look to it like, this is some interesting stuff that this guy's saying. We're getting fed all these lies from the Trump administration. We're getting fed all this bullshit from the Democrats and so forth. If you're living here in the United States or whatever country you're living in, you can kind of transpose it to your living conditions, right? But our so-called world leaders aren't helping us, really. They're only looking out for their own best interest. And here's Maitreya going to be on TV with, no hidden agenda. So when he starts to speak a little bit more directly, it's not and about his priorities for humanity, about how humanity can change, how the hope that humanity can turn and start to create peace and so forth. But we have to do some things. We have to share. We have to look at ourselves as one and so forth. It will be a revelation for most people to hear somebody on TV speaking like that, speaking to our world leaders for the need to change with no fear. They won't be afraid of somebody like Donald Trump's Twitter account. He won't care about that, and so he'll start to galvanize humanity in a way that has never been seen before, ever in the history of humanity. Now, when that starts to happen, there will be a crescendo of interest into what he's talking about, especially, but also who he is. And then eventually, we as a humanity will demand from our media him to be allowed the opportunity to speak to all of us. Now, we'll all know the time that it's going to happen. We'll have plenty of advance notice. You won't have to worry about what television channel it is, because every single television channel, according to these masters, whether you're in the United States, Europe, anywhere in the world, you'll have the opportunity to see him on TV. And he will speak directly to humanity for however long he does. Now, once he starts to speak, we're going to all notice that his mouth isn't moving. We're going to hear what he's saying inwardly in our own head, in our own language. So there will be no misinterpretation of what he's saying. He'll give us visions of what will happen if we do not create peace, how awful that's going to look. We'll literally see it from Maitreya's perspective. We will also see from Maitreya's perspective what will happen if we do just create the principle of sharing, start to see ourselves as one, start to work together, start to help build and create justice in the world. How beautiful it will be for humanity if we just do that one thing. And the future that will be waiting for us, far different, far more glorious, far better than anybody in any that could ever think of. And we will see it from the Lord of Love's perspective, including everyone. Where the joy of living is a living presence on planet Earth for all to participate in. We'll all see each other's creativity as divine. And we will start to experience and start to manifest our own divinity and our own creativity and start to manifest our own joy in our own lives in real time. We'll see this for ourselves and how important it is. And so even some of the most hardened cynics, when they see this for themselves, will see the need for sharing, will see the need to see ourselves as one, where they couldn't do it even with Maitreya just speaking directly to them on TV. It'll be a day like no other day, but it will also be the day that Maitreya will say, yes, I am known as Maitreya, or I am known as the Christ, or the Imam. People look to me as Sri Krishna, or people just look to me as a teacher. But he will always say that he prefers to be called just a teacher, because that's who and what he is, above anything else. Now, that's what's waiting humanity. It's maybe unpredictable compared to what you are unexpected compared to what you were thinking I was going to say. But to answer the question, is he coming soon? I think it's very, very soon. I think it's probably far sooner than even I think or am expecting. I still live my life just like you do, planning my day, planning my month. You know, my daughter's going to go to college in a few years, so I got to work toward that. I got to do this. All these things that I'm planning for myself will be quite disrupted by the change that we're about to see based on the Lord of Love speaking to humanity and people starting to recognize him. So it'll be far sooner than most of us ever really expect. And it will take most of us, even those who have known this information for decades, by complete surprise. And so wait, be patient, don't look for a time, don't expect a time to come for me or anybody else. The timing will come when the timing is perfect for Maitreya to give that information like that, but it will mark we will look back historically at the Day of Declaration as the day that humanity finally stepped back from the precipice. And it will, because Maitreya and the masters who will be teaching us directly will be inspiring us to do it ourselves. That step back from the precipice will be the time that it will mark also the time that we will never go back to the precipice. So it'll be a day like no other day. It'll be a day that it will look as the single biggest change in the course of human history. And it will be even greater than that. So how many incredibles and greats does Donald Trump say in one speech? You can take all those incredibles and phenomenal or whatever words he used, buzzwords he uses, and you can use it as an adjective for the Day of Declaration, and it will pale in comparison to what it really will mean for humanity, really. But whew, that says a lot. But to bring it back to, if you're not quite sure about what a master is, okay, so that's the history of it and kind of bringing it up to date. Who and what a person is very much related to who and what a master is we are all divine. The masters will all tell us, Maitreya will say, there's nobody above anybody else. People always say that Maitreya will, try to rise up above God and assert himself above God. I say this over and over again because this is the truth of the matter. You will see in Maitreya not only somebody that will never assert himself above God, but he won't assert himself and make himself even above the most lowest of humanity. These masters value all life in all its forms, without exception. Even the smallest of worms, they see beauty in the life of that and respect and allow that life to live and not harm it. And when we see the Space Brothers and interact with them, we'll see the same type of harmless love toward one another that we don't experience on this world right now. It's not manifesting like that. But the masters will be teaching us this directly. We will be seeing it moment to moment when they interact with us, when we work with them, when we see that when they interact with our world leaders and so forth. It'll totally transform life on this planet in our own lives. So the tail end of all of our lives will be far richer and greater than the beginning parts of our lives, based on the knowledge of who we are as souls. We are all souls in incarnation. We are all divine without exception. These masters just manifest it perfectly, where we are still doing it maybe here or there every once in a while. That creativity might be very dim, but we will see these in these masters, every one of them, without exception. The Master Jesus, the Master who was Paul, the Master who was John, the Master Rakuzi, the Master Jwalkul, Maitreya himself. We will see men from our perspective without fault, who love unconditionally, who live harmlessly, who have wisdom of all the ages. All the ancient texts will be theirs at the slightest little bit of effort, but given freely to humanity without cost. Free to give to you. They're only limiting their amount of teaching based on how much you can benefit from it at that time. But nothing will ever be withheld from their wisdom to us at any moment that we can't handle. But it'll be given freely, where they will be teaching us how to live free, without the burdens of capitalism or communism or socialism, but to live as one family like we did eons ago. And we've lost our way in so many ways, to the point where we could destroy ourselves. It's that separate, and it's that dire. But you will see in Maitreya a brother, a friend, a mentor. That's it. Nobody claiming to be above anybody else, but he won't look to you as being above him or somebody famous above him. He will see us all as equal amongst, brothers and sisters, all one, under the one God. And he will be speaking nothing but truth, nothing but wisdom within the humor of the ages, but yet very delightful, very light, but very simple. That's who and what we're all waiting on, that know about who and what Maitreya is, really. Now, to tie it into this, do I think they're real? Absolutely. I've had so many personal experiences with Maitreya over the course of my young life of 48 years that I know really without a shadow of a doubt that they're here. And it's only a matter of time before people start to see what Benjamin Creme had been saying when he was alive. It will start to manifest. I wouldn't put my name into these videos, my full name, Gary Willing. I would not be putting that in there if I didn't believe that they were real. And I have no fear that I have no fear that I'm looked upon as crazy now, but I have no fear that these things won't start to manifest in some way. It might not be exactly how I explained it, but they'll start to manifest in some way, right? Based on my own personal experiences with Maitreya. And if you are interested, I recommend going to my playlist that I have. I have all my experiences that I am willing to that I can share with you, that were confirmed by Benjamin Creme. I've put in a playlist for anyone to hear. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be more than happy to talk about that if you want. But so rather than extending it out even more, that's really who and what the masters are. It also answered the question about the timing of it. Now, the other question from Robert Workman, that he said the trials will be after the election. I do think there might be some struggle and some turmoil, and that might actually hasten Maitreya coming forward, and in order to help alleviate a lot of the suffering that would occur if he didn't. But I also think because there really is no leadership anymore in this country, they're all just tearing each other apart. Humanity is what's suffering. We're suffering with COVID, we're suffering with unemployment, we're suffering with uncertainty, and this is the time, I think, when the teacher will start to speak more and more directly. Do I think it's going to be next week, next month, next year? It could be tomorrow that we all start to see him. It's going to happen one day. It might be the 10th of October. I'm not saying it is going to be the 10th of October, but it could very well be the next day could be the day that you actually turn on the television without even thinking about it. And, oh my gosh, I'd seen that guy on TV before, and he just said something that I think he might be, maybe, possibly. So that's where I think for each one of us individually that you maybe have heard this information for decades, that's what's waiting for us in the very near future. So hopefully this helps. Again, I look forward to questions and comments about this, and we can talk more about this in the future. But I hope you have a great
Remember
day.
To take action
and
help
we'll talk
SOP
to you soon.
save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.